Okay, so imagine you're a trained military officer, armed, stationed in a nuclear weapons facility, and you see something land in the forest outside your base. You investigate with your team, you get close enough to touch it, you file an official report, and then the government just goes, yeah, that was probably a lighthouse. A lighthouse in a forest that you touched. And this isn't some random conspiracy theory. This is documented in official military reports that were locked away for decades. Welcome to the Rendlesham Forest Incident, and buckle up because this is about to get weird. December 1980. Cold War is in full swing. Everyone's paranoid. Nuclear tensions are at an all-time high. And in the middle of the English countryside, between two Royal Air Force bases used by the United States Air Force, something is about to happen that will become one of the most credible and well-documented UFO cases in history. And when I say well-documented, I mean we have official military reports, multiple witnesses with security clearances, physical evidence, and radiation readings. This isn't your uncle's blurry photo of a weather balloon. This is the real deal. Let me set the scene for you. RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk, England. These aren't just any bases. They're housing nuclear weapons during one of the tensiest periods of the Cold War. The security here is absolute. The people stationed here are trained military personnel, not random civilians who saw a weird light and decided it was aliens. These are people who are trained to identify aircraft, who have security clearances, who have everything to lose by making up stories. Keep that in mind. It's December 26, 1980, Boxing Day for the Brits. Around 3 a.m., security personnel notice strange lights descending into Rendlesham Forest, just outside the base perimeter. Now, when you're guarding a nuclear weapons facility and you see unknown lights near your base, you don't just ignore it. You investigate. This could be an enemy aircraft, a downed plane, security breach. You have to check it out. So Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston and Airman John Burroughs, along with another airman, head out into the forest. They're expecting to find a downed aircraft, maybe some wreckage. They're trained for this. They've got flashlights, radios, and weapons. Just another night of investigating something weird, right? Wrong. So wrong. As they get closer, they realize this is not a plane. The light is too bright, too strange. Peniston later described it as like the forest was lit up in slow motion. The animals had gone completely silent. No birds, no foxes, nothing. Just eerie silence. Anyone who spent time in nature knows that when the animals go quiet, something is very wrong. The forest was holding its breath. And then they see it. Peniston describes a craft sitting in a small clearing. Triangular, about 9 feet long and 6.5 feet high. Metallic, smooth, covered in symbols that looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs, mixed with something else entirely unknown. The craft was emitting a bright white light, and the air around it felt warm despite the freezing December night. Peniston, following his training, does what any good military investigator would do. He approaches it. He walks right up to this thing and touches it. Let that sink in. A United States Air Force Staff Sergeant stationed at a nuclear weapons facility walked up to an unknown craft and put his hands on it. He later said the surface felt smooth, like glass, and warm. He saw the symbols up close. He even sketched them in his notebook later, and we have those sketches. This is documented. Meanwhile, Burroughs is circling the object, and he later reported that time felt weird, like it was stretching and compressing. His radio was going haywire, full of static and strange interference. Then the craft moved, not moved. Peniston described it as maneuvering through the trees, not like it was pushing through them, but like it was navigating between them with impossible precision. It rose up, and then in a burst of speed that defied physics, it shot off into the night sky. The whole encounter lasted about an hour, but both Peniston and Burroughs said time felt completely distorted. When they got back to base, they were disoriented, confused, and they couldn't fully explain what had just happened. Now, here's where it gets even weirder. The next day, December 27th, they went back to the clearing in daylight to investigate. They found 3 indentations in the ground arranged in a triangular pattern, each about 7 inches in diameter and 1.5 inches deep. The trees around the clearing had broken branches at about the same height, as if something had pushed through or landed there. They took plaster casts of the indentations. They photographed everything, and then they brought in radiation detection equipment. The radiation readings at the landing site were significantly higher than the background radiation of the area. We're talking about measurements that were 7 to 10 times higher than normal in the 3 indentations and the center of the triangle they formed. The peak reading was in the center. This isn't something you can fake. Radiation meters don't just randomly spike because you want them to. Something with radioactive properties had been at that location. But wait, there's more. Because apparently, the universe decided that one night of weirdness wasn't enough. On December 28th, 2 nights after the initial incident, the Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, decided to investigate the site himself with a team of airmen. Halt was a skeptic. He thought his men had probably seen a downed aircraft or something mundane, and he was going to prove it. Halt brought a team, radiation detection equipment, and crucially, and this is what makes this case so extraordinary, he brought a handheld tape recorder. We have actual audio of this investigation. You can listen to it right now on the internet. It's not a reconstruction. It's not someone's memory. It's the actual live audio of a military officer encountering something he cannot explain. On the tape, you can hear Halt and his team measuring radiation, discussing the indentations, and then they see the lights. Multiple lights in the forest and in the sky. Halt describes a red, sun-like object moving through the trees. He describes it breaking into 5 white objects and disappearing. He describes lights in the sky that appear to be dripping molten metal. His voice on the tape goes from calm and professional to increasingly confused and amazed. At one point on the tape, you hear him say, "Here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now. This is weird. It's coming this way. It's definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There's no doubt about it. This is weird." This is a lieutenant colonel with years of military experience, and you can hear the confusion and wonder in his voice. The lights they saw that night were also witnessed by other airmen back at the base. We're not talking about 1 or 2 people. We're talking about dozens of credentialed military personnel seeing the same thing. Some reported seeing a large triangular craft with colored lights. Others saw beams of light coming down from objects in the sky, some of which appear to target specific areas of the base, including the weapons storage area. Yes, something was seemingly interested in the nuclear weapons. Halt wrote an official memorandum about the incident and sent it up the chain of command. This memo, known as the Halt Memo, was released to the public in 1983 through the Freedom of Information Act. It's a dry, official military document that basically says, yes, we saw something, we measured it, we documented it, and we have no idea what it was. The memo was addressed to the British Ministry of Defense and included the radiation readings, the physical evidence, and descriptions of the light phenomena. Now, the official response from both the US and UK governments has been, let's say, underwhelming. The Ministry of Defense initially claimed the incident posed no threat to national security and didn't investigate further. Later, they suggested various explanations. The Orfordness Lighthouse, located about 5 miles away, was blamed for some of the lights. They also suggested the witnesses might have seen a fireball meteor that was reported around that time, or perhaps the lights from a police car. Let's address these explanations because they're honestly insulting to anyone with a functioning brain. First, the lighthouse theory. The Orfordness Lighthouse had been operating in that location for years. The military personnel stationed at those bases had seen that lighthouse countless times. They knew what a lighthouse looked like. Penniston allegedly walked up to and touched a solid, metallic object covered in symbols. You don't touch a lighthouse beam. The lighthouse is also 5 miles away, separated by forest and terrain. It doesn't move, it doesn't land, it doesn't leave radiation traces or physical indentations in the ground. The meteor explanation is equally ridiculous. Meteors don't land gently in clearings, hang around for an hour while you walk up and touch them, and then fly away. They don't appear multiple nights in a row. They don't emit radiation patterns. They don't move through trees with precise maneuvering. And they definitely don't show up again 2 nights later for an encore performance. The police car theory is just, I don't even know where to start. These are military personnel trained to identify aircraft and vehicles. They know what car lights look like. And again, car lights don't land in clearings, leave physical traces, emit radiation, or fly away at impossible speeds. What makes the Rendlesham Forest Incident so compelling is the sheer amount of evidence and credible witnesses. We're not talking about one person who saw a light in the sky. We're talking about multiple nights of activity, multiple independent witnesses with security clearances, physical evidence, including ground traces and radiation readings, official military documentation, and actual audio recordings. This is as close to a smoking gun as you can get in ufology. Jim Penniston, one of the primary witnesses, has been incredibly consistent in his account over the decades. In 2010, he revealed something he kept secret for 30 years. He claimed that when he touched the craft, he received what he described as a binary code download directly into his mind. He said he had an overwhelming compulsion to write down pages and pages of ones and zeros in his notebook in the days following the incident. Years later, he had this binary code analyzed, and according to him, when translated, it contained coordinates for various ancient sites around the world and a message that referenced exploration of humanity and future coordinates. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds absolutely insane. And you're right, it does. But here's the thing. Penniston passed multiple polygraph tests about his experience. He's maintained the same story for over 40 years despite ridicule and skepticism. He had everything to lose and nothing to gain by coming forward. His military career was solid. He was respected. And then he tells this story that makes him sound crazy. Why would he do that if it wasn't true? John Burroughs, the other primary witness, has also been consistent. In fact, Burroughs had such severe health problems after the incident that he sought his military medical records to help with his treatment. The Air Force initially refused to release his records, claiming they didn't exist or were classified. It took a senator's intervention to get his records released. Think about that. A serviceman's medical records were so sensitive that they required senatorial intervention to obtain. What could possibly be in those records that required that level of secrecy? In 2015, Burroughs finally received his medical records and was able to get treatment through the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA acknowledged that his health issues were related to his military service, specifically to his exposure during the Rendlesham Forest Incident. While the VA didn't explicitly say yes, he was exposed to alien technology, they effectively acknowledged that something happened to him during that incident that caused lasting health effects. Charles Halt, the deputy base commander who led the second investigation, has also never wavered from his account. He's given numerous interviews, written statements, and even testified about the incident. In 2010, he signed a notarized affidavit stating that the incident happened as he described it and that there's been an official cover-up. This is a retired colonel with decades of honorable service, making a sworn statement that the government is hiding the truth about what happened. Let's talk about what was actually going on at these bases at the time, because context matters. RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters were part of NATO's nuclear deterrent during the Cold War. These bases housed tactical nuclear weapons as part of the U.S. Air Force's presence in Europe. The security around these weapons was absolute. Any unidentified aircraft or object near these facilities would be treated as a potential threat and investigated immediately. The fact that something was able to penetrate the security of a nuclear weapons facility, apparently with ease, and show interest in the weapons storage areas, should have been cause for massive concern. If this was Soviet technology, it would have been an incredible breach of security. If it was some unknown human technology, same problem. But the official response was basically, nothing to see here, probably a lighthouse. That response doesn't match the severity of the security breach. Over the years, more witnesses have come forward. Some have reported seeing military personnel taking soil samples from the landing site. Others have reported seeing higher-ranking officials at the scene who haven't been officially acknowledged. There are reports of photographic and video evidence that was confiscated and has never been released. Multiple witnesses have reported being debriefed and told not to talk about what they saw. one particularly interesting detail. Several witnesses reported that the object they saw had what appeared to be markings or symbols on it that resembled ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Independent witnesses, interviewed separately, drew similar symbols. Penniston sketches of the symbols have been analyzed by linguists, and no one could definitively identify what language or writing system they represent, though they do bear some resemblance to various ancient writing systems. The timing of the incident is also interesting. December 1980 was a period of heightened Cold War tensions. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan had occurred a year earlier, and relations between the superpowers were icy. Nuclear war felt like a real possibility. Some researchers have suggested that if the Rendlesham Forest Incident was indeed a non-human intelligence, perhaps they were concerned about humanity's nuclear capabilities and were monitoring the weapons. This would fit with patterns from other UFO incidents that have occurred near nuclear facilities worldwide. There have been literally dozens of UFO incidents reported at nuclear weapons facilities over the decades. In 1967, UFOs were reported hovering over Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, and during the sighting, 10 nuclear missiles went offline simultaneously. The missiles were in separate underground silos with independent systems, and they all failed at the exact same moment for no explainable reason. When asked about this incident years later, the former missile officer Bob Salas has maintained that a UFO was responsible. Similar incidents have been reported at other nuclear bases around the world. So if we assume for a moment that the Rendlesham Forest Incident was real, that something not made by humans landed in that forest, what could it have been? The most obvious explanation that people jump to is extraterrestrial. Something from another planet came here to observe us, possibly concerned about our nuclear weapons, made contact with military personnel, and then left. This explanation fits the evidence but requires us to accept that aliens are real and visiting Earth, which is a big leap. Another theory is that it was some kind of experimental military craft, possibly from another nation or even from a secret US program. But this doesn't really fit the evidence. Why would the US test experimental aircraft near its own nuclear weapons facility, risking security and confusing its own personnel? And why would the technology still be secret 40 years later? Plus, the craft's behavior, moving through trees, instant acceleration, the strange symbols, doesn't match any known human technology even today, let alone in 1980. Some researchers have proposed interdimensional theories, that the craft wasn't from another planet, but from another dimension or reality. This is speculative and sounds like science fiction, but it would explain some of the stranger aspects of the encounter, like the time distortion effects reported by witnesses and the seemingly impossible maneuvers of the craft. There's also the possibility of something even weirder, that this was some kind of time travel incident, either humans from the future or something else entirely moving through time. This would explain why the technology seems so advanced and why there might be coordinates to ancient sites in the binary code. But again, this is highly speculative. The skeptical explanations, lighthouse, meteor, police car, just don't hold up under scrutiny. They don't explain the physical evidence, the radiation readings, the multiple nights of activity, or the consistency of witness testimony. They certainly don't explain why medical records would be classified or why witnesses would be debriefed and told not to talk. What's particularly frustrating about this case is that we likely have evidence that's been classified and hidden. Multiple witnesses have reported that photographs were taken, that video was recorded, that soil and physical samples were collected. Where is all of that evidence? Who has it? Why is it classified? If this was really just a lighthouse and some confused airmen, why the secrecy? The British Ministry of Defense released thousands of pages of UFO documents over the years, and the Rendlesham Forest Incident features prominently in many of them. But there are also clear indications that some documents are still classified or have been destroyed. In 2011, the UK's National Archives released a statement saying that some Rendlesham files had gone missing, possibly destroyed in a flood or water leak. How convenient that the files for one of the most important UFO cases in history just happened to get destroyed. What I find most compelling about this case is the character and credibility of the witnesses. These weren't attention seekers or people prone to wild stories. Jim Penniston had a distinguished military career. Charles Halt rose to the rank of colonel. John Burroughs served honorably. These men had security clearances and were trusted with protecting nuclear weapons. They were trained observers, and they all saw something that changed their lives. The personal cost to these witnesses has been real. Some have faced ridicule, skepticism from former colleagues, and difficulty in their careers. Penniston has said that coming forward about the binary code message was one of the hardest decisions of his life because he knew how crazy it would sound. But he felt compelled to tell the complete truth, regardless of the personal cost. In 2010, several of the Rendlesham witnesses participated in a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., along with other military and government witnesses to UFO events. They called for congressional hearings on the UFO phenomenon and for the release of classified information. Charles Halt was there, Jim Penniston was there, and they joined other credible witnesses in demanding transparency. These are serious people making serious allegations about government secrecy. The Rendlesham Forest Incident has been investigated by numerous researchers, journalists, and documentary filmmakers over the years. Some have tried to debunk it, some have tried to prove it, but the core facts remain unchanged. Something happened in Rendlesham Forest in December 1980. Military personnel encountered something they couldn't identify. Physical evidence was collected, official reports were filed, and the government's explanation doesn't match the evidence. One interesting development came in 2014 when a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer named George Filer came forward and stated that he was on duty at a nearby base during the Rendlesham incident. He claims that he saw the object on radar, that it was tracked moving at impossible speeds, and that he was later told by superiors that this event never happened. According to Filer, the object was tracked going from near ground level to thousands of feet in seconds, speeds that would have destroyed any conventional aircraft. The local civilian population around Rendlesham Forest also reported strange things during those days in December 1980. Some reported seeing unusual lights in the sky. Farm animals were reported behaving strangely. There were reports of unusual interference with electronic equipment. These civilian reports corroborate that something unusual was happening in the area. Today, Rendlesham Forest has become something of a pilgrimage site for UFO enthusiasts. There's a trail that takes you to the approximate location of the landing site. The Forestry Commission has even put up a model UFO at the site. It's become part of the local tourism industry, which is kind of surreal when you think about it. People are literally walking through the forest where trained military personnel encountered something that defied explanation. The legacy of the Rendlesham Forest Incident extends beyond just the UFO community. It's been studied by physicists, psychologists, and sociologists as a case study in how extraordinary claims are handled by authorities and society. It raises questions about government transparency, the nature of evidence, and how we deal with phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. What frustrates me most about this case is that we may never know the full truth. If there is classified evidence, photos, videos, physical samples, additional reports, it may remain locked away for decades or forever. The people who know what really happened may take that knowledge to their graves, and we're left with tantalizing pieces of a puzzle that we can't quite complete. But here's what we do know for certain. In December 1980, multiple trained military observers at a high-security nuclear weapons facility encountered something anomalous. They documented it through official channels. They collected physical evidence. They recorded audio of their investigations. And decades later, they still maintain their accounts despite personal and professional costs. That's not nothing. Whether it was extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers, or something else entirely, something real happened in Rendlesham Forest. The witnesses are credible, the evidence is substantial, and the official explanations are inadequate. This case deserves serious scientific investigation, not dismissal and ridicule. The Rendlesham Forest Incident stands as one of the most important UFO cases in history, not just because of what was seen, but because of who saw it and how well it was documented. It's a case that demands we ask difficult questions about what we know, what we don't know, and what might be visiting us from wherever or whenever they're from. So the next time someone tells you that all UFO sightings are just confused people seeing weather balloons or swamp gas, remember Rendlesham. Remember that trained military personnel encountered something at a nuclear weapons facility, documented it, reported it through official channels, and were told they saw a lighthouse. Remember that we have audio recordings, official memos, radiation readings, and multiple credible witnesses. And remember that after 40+ years, no one has been able to adequately explain what really happened in those woods. The truth is out there, as they say. And in the case of Rendlesham Forest, some of that truth is sitting in classified files that we're not allowed to see, which kind of makes you wonder, what are they hiding? And more importantly, why? Thanks for watching, and remember, if trained military personnel at a nuclear weapons facility can encounter something they can't explain and be told they're wrong about what they experienced, what does that say about how seriously authorities take this phenomenon? Stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep asking questions, because the universe is a lot stranger than we've been led to believe.